And welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. This is the show for Friday, December the 15th, recording live here on a Thursday evening before Thursday Night Football, as we always are at Boom Boss Craft Pizza and Tap House in Spring Hill. I'm joined, as always, by producer JT. You can follow on social media at JT_Ruhnke. JT, it's good to be back here at Boom Boss. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. And, Boombah's tonight is bumping. A lot of people.
It is.
A lot of people probably out doing their holiday shopping and whatnot, and they decided to come down and come hang out at Boombah's Craft Pizza and Tap House, because Lord knows.
I asked all of them.
Yeah, the Lord knows they're not here for the Thursday night football tonight.
Well,
that is for
they're
sure.
They're here for us. They're here for the food. They're here for the drinks. Maybe here for the televisions that aren't showing. I don't know what else is going on tonight, but the football game itself is probably low on the quarter. Got a little Easton stick action versus who's the other quarterback?
Probably Aiden O'Connell. I don't think we know yet.
Raiders Chargers tonight. No Josh Jacobs. It's going to be a time. I tell you what, it's always funny. It feels like once a year, the past couple of years, Easton Stick has been in the conversation nationally because he's been in for a hurt Justin Herbert. And it is I'm somebody that, how many Eastons do you know? Like, I would imagine I'm probably the only one you know personally. Easton Corbin is a country singer.
I don't know who that was.
Exactly. There's Easton Stick, quarterback for the Chargers.
Before I met you, I think the only Easton I knew was the absolute monster of a aluminum bat that I used to be swinging around.
Or your hockey stick, perhaps.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, it's weird for me because I've always had a name where I'm not used to hearing, hey, Matthew, hey, Kevin, hey, John, out in public. I'm sure when you have a more common name, that's commonplace for you. But on the rare instance when I hear my name said not to me in public, it is a massive double take. And so all week long, every sports show I watch or listen to, I hear Easton Stick mentioned and I hear my name, and it just weirds me out because I'm not used to that. Stephen A. Smith saying my name is not a thing that I hear ever, right? Like, so that catches me off guard. Regardless, we are getting so sidetracked here at the top of the show. Thank you so much for joining us live, those of you that are already tuning in. A couple of things before we dive into all things OILERS Texans. A little shootout here in Nashville coming to us on Sunday afternoon. Should be a good one. We're going to be talking about whether or not the Texans are bringing a Davis Mills shaped knife to a gunfight in this one. Kind of disappointed personally that we're not getting a Stroud versus Leather showdown, but in terms of the Titans' odds to win the game, does not hurt. Davis Mills is in the rotation. We're going to talk about that. Although I do think, and one of the things we're going to discuss today primarily, I think that people are writing off what a Davis Mills-led Texans team could do to a Titans team. And my evidence for that is taking folks back and reminding them what he has done to them in the past. So we're gonna dive into all of that today. Before we do, as well as the news with JT and the Best Bet Gauntlet, of course, not the bury the lead, Best Bet Gauntlet, where we continue to make ourselves and you all money that are smart enough, wise enough to tail our money-making ventures here on the show. All of that and more. First, if you're watching live, do us a favor, head on over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, that's great and awesome. Leave those places. Go to YouTube. Find this live stream there. It's the best viewing experience for you. And it's where you'll be able to be a part of the conversation, like our buddy Joseph, who's already in the comments, and Stoney, welcoming us, the Boom Boys, as he has dubbed us, back to his, I'm assuming, television in his home on this fine Thursday evening. Stoney, happy to have you with us. Happy to have all of you with us that are here. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, comments on this game in the comment section of that YouTube video. And while you're there, the biggest favor you can do us is hit that subscribe button, the Broadway Sports Media YouTube page. If you could subscribe there, trying to get that number up as much as possible. It is free to you. It's very helpful to us. So thank you in advance for doing that. And if you wouldn't mind hitting like, hitting retweet, hitting follow if you're on social media, whatever you can do to help us share this show, get as many live eyeballs on it as possible, that would be very helpful as well. Okay, before we dive into everything, the last thing we have to do is give a proper shout out to our wonderful and amazing sponsor here, Boombah's Craft Pizza and Tap House. As we mentioned, the best viewing experience, in my opinion, of any sports bar in the Nashville area. They've got fantastic televisions, a fantastic selection of local and domestic options on tap for you to drink from, and a fantastic selection of food on their menu. We love everything about this place, and you will too. 3 locations in the Middle Tennessee area, in Spring Hill, which is our home base here, as well as in East Nashville and Murfreesboro. Check them out. It's Boombah's Craft Pizza and Tap House. All right, all of that housekeeping out of the way. JT, let's dive into some. Let's start with some stats today on this game. We've got a couple of stats and info that are worth mentioning. Every week when we do this in our preview show, we are pulling some information from our own research, some information from the research that the Titans research department does very well. They send out to us, those of us in the media, to relay to you folks at home. And we were surprised earlier today that one stat that is the staple. It's the go-to statistic in this matchup. Was not included on that sheet that was sent to us. Talking about Derrick Henry, who I don't know if you're familiar. He's got a little bit of a track record against this team. He tends to what's the child appropriate way to say this? Tends to really mess up the Texans when he plays them. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation today.
I guess you could.
He owns the Texans historically. Whether he will or not in this game is an interesting conversation based on the fact that this is the first time he's played the Texans, where there's a bit of a split backfield situation. So will that matchup be split up between players? Will it be a vintage Derrick Henry game once again? Will it continue this trend of less Derrick, more Tajay? I don't know. We're gonna discuss that. But some stats that we were given and that I think are interesting enough to relate to you all at home. The Texans have allowed their opponents to be successful on 40% of plays this season, which is tied for 7th best in the NFL. The Titans, for their part, have been successful on 38% of plays they have run the season, tied for the 4th worst in the NFL. So that's a bit of a immovable object meets unstoppable force situation. Something has to give in that regard. Another one, the Texans have allowed 3.2 yards per carry when defending rushes up the middle to running backs this season, tied for the 2nd best in the NFL, which is along the lines of that discussion regarding Derrick Henry's performance in this one. The Titans, for their part, are averaging 3.5 yards per carry on rushes up the middle, tied for 4th worst in the NFL. A lot of that could be attributed to that little lull when they were missing Tierra Tart in the middle of the season and allowing anybody and everybody to have whatever they want between the tackles. One last statistic for you. The Titans have thrown for 20-plus yards on 15 of 116 total passing attempts since Week 11, which is 4th best in the NFL. The Texans have allowed 20-plus yards on 12% of attempts since Week 11, tied for 3rd worst in the NFL. That's the one that I find most interesting, and that is the one that is going to tie most directly into the conversation of how this Titans offense matches up with this Texans defense. Spoiler, I think it's a very good situation for the Titans. If how the Texans have run their defense so far this season is any indicator of how they're going to play on Sunday. But first, I want to talk about the pettiness, and let's talk about the least consequential topic revolving around this game. We're not going to talk about the X's and O's. We're not going to talk about the players. We're going to talk about the jerseys, the uniforms they're going to be wearing. And this is the primary topic this week because it's the all-time petty move by the Titans. And I don't mean that negatively. I support this 100%. I think we were calling for it before the schedule came out. We said, hey, y'all have said you're going to wear these throwback uniforms twice this year. If one of them is not the Texans home game, I don't know what you're doing. And they were smart enough to do that. And so you're getting a little Titans wearing the uniform that the Texans fans have grown up knowing and loving and are salty still to this day over, I guess, them deciding not to pay for a new stadium, which is their own fault. But we don't have to dive into all of that. The point is it belongs to the Tennessee Titans, the Tennessee Oilers, which a lot of my favorite thing in the world is when a Texans fan or a Texas native online likes to tell you, why are they wearing the Oilers uniforms? They never were the Oilers in Tennessee. Yes, they were. Yes, they were. So they are the Tennessee Oilers this weekend against the Houston Texans, and it has folks in a tizzy. I had some multiple people get on to me earlier this week on social media. I pointed out in the post-game locker room speech from Mike Vrabel last Monday night after the Dolphins win, he told his players that he might be wearing a cowboy hat in the honor of former Oilers legend Bum Phillips, the old head coach who had a very unique look on the sidelines. We're still actively trying to hold him to that. Today, I'm not super confident that's going to happen based on his remarks, but I'm going to be very disappointed if he doesn't. I'm hoping he has enough players in his ear saying, you have to do this. Like, we're going to make you do this. Here, we're going to go buy you a hat. But regardless, folks, they're the line they were going with on social media, not only are they mad about this, but they're saying that they're mad about the jerseys. They're also mad about the Bum Phillips. Like, is this cultural appropriation that Mike Vrabel is threatening? Is that what this is? They got mad at me for spelling Bum Phillips' name wrong, which I'm aware has 2 L's in it, but my phone at this point autocorrects to 1 L because Kyle Phillips is the only Phillips I'm referring to when I'm typing. So sorry about that. The point is that's been their line, and it's very silly. Do you have any thoughts on the pettiness of this before we talk about what I think is maybe a more important petty topic, some revenge game situations?
Yeah, I mean, it really is just like the pettiness doesn't really have a backing, like there is no backing for this pettiness, because after all, it is the Tennessee Oilers. This franchise moved from Houston to Tennessee.
And why did they do that? Because the good people of Houston refused to build them a stadium.
And then Houston got another team. So that is the team now. It's not like the Texans have any affiliation to what that Houston Oilers team was, because it's an entirely different franchise with an entirely different history. So that's what I'll say on that. But once again, I think it's pretty silly.
It is silly. Stoney in the comments pointing out that putting Billy White Shoes Johnson in the Ring of Honor this weekend, which the Titans are doing, is pretty savage as well. A player that his entire career was spent in Houston as a Houston Oiler. But too bad, so sad. He's getting put into the Ring of Honor of the franchise that he played for. Yell at a wall. Okay, what I do think is petty and important in this game. Little petty, little substantive. There are some revenge games here. The least of which I would say is Robert Woods against the Titans. He was barely a Titan. He had a cup of coffee here. He's done better a year removed from his year removed ACL, a year removed from the ACL surgery, which most players tend to do in Houston. He's also got a better passing situation on that team this year with CJ Stroud than he had last year with the offensive line and Ryan Tannehill. So that's one. But for the Titans part, what I find really interesting is this is the first time this year that both Tim Kelly and DeAndre Hopkins get to play their former team. And they both have legitimate reasons, very different reasons, but legitimate reasons to have circled this game, I think, pretty early on in their calendar. We know the DeAndre Hopkins story, how Billy O'Brien was not a huge fan of DeAndre and shipped him off for a hill of beans. And that was a whole ordeal. And they also then likely probably slandered him and started this narrative that he doesn't like to practice and that he's not a team guy. Like, all of that came out of Houston. There's bad blood there, obviously. So I'm sure DeAndre has this circled. But with Tim Kelly, I think it's lesser known. He was a guy that could have been interviewed for coaching positions, maybe head coaching positions, around the league when he was still coordinating for the Texans a couple of years ago. Most famously to Titans fans, Mike Vrabel tried to interview him for the open head offensive coordinator job when Arthur Smith left. And the Texans denied that interview. When you have the rights to a guy under contract, you don't have to let them go interview. The Texans did that to Tim Kelly. And whether or not Tim Kelly's upset about that, I don't know. But that certainly, I could see you being upset about that. And I could see him having this game circled as well. I think that both of them are going to come into this game with a little bit something extra motivation-wise in this matchup. Am I off base? Am I reaching on that?
I think at least for DeAndre Hopkins, I think it means something.
I'm confident it means something to DeAndre, yeah.
This isn't the first time DeAndre Hopkins has played his former team, the team that drafted him, and he really has come up in the league with. The last time he played against the Houston Texans, he went 7 catches on 9 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown.
Okay.
But I think it's more about the pomp and circumstance of it all this time, wearing those Houston Oilers jerseys, going up against this team, a Houston Texans team that has some ambitions that I don't think were very much there at the beginning of the season. And especially as coming off a big win like last week, I think it definitely means something for him. It also means, I think for Tim Kelly at least, it's a chance for him to get things going in the right direction against a divisional opponent. We've seen this year so far how this Tennessee Titans team has very much struggled against their divisional opponents. So if anything, outside of the Houston
struggled
Texans,
is a kind way of saying they haven't won one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be important for him to get going against a divisional opponent.
Let's talk about that opponent and what I alluded to earlier. From a 10,000-foot view, schematically, how is this Titans offense going to match up against this Texans defense? If you caught a football show earlier today, I was listening to that on the way here, and they beat me to the chase on this one, and Zach actually did a better job than I did. He pulled up some of the PFF charting numbers and some of the statistics on this. I did not do that. So if you want the specifics, you know what? Great opportunity to advertise a show here on the 440 Network. Check out a football show after this one. But he talked about, rightly, how this Texans team, sneaky defensively, has been extremely zone heavy this year. It's not a bad thing. We know other team. I mean, the team that you think about, at least when I think about who's a really zone heavy team, there are certain guys in the NFL who come to mind before D'Amico Ryan's defensive unit. But this Texans unit this year has run zone in the 70s%. I think it was 74% of their defensive snaps, something in that area, have been zone looks. And that is very good news for the Tennessee Titans, whose receiving core at this point are kind of famous for not being good at separating. Like, that's clearly not their thing. The guy that you could point to and say he's kind of their only receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, happens to be the worst or one of the worst guys on the team at separating. And so that's not their jam. When they get a man-heavy team, they've struggled to produce in the passing game. But against zone, this receiving core has been dramatically more effective. Part of that is just having a wily vet like Hopkins, who his game is predicated on, I know how to exploit your defense when you're in zone. I can find that soft spot. I can sit down right here. I can look off a man and get him to step in the wrong direction, commit to the wrong part of the zone, and I'm going to get open, or I'm going to get my buddy open who's lined up next to me. He's on that. He's on it, and that's going to be something that you see a lot this weekend. But I think that's going to help a guy like Will Levis as well. Not make it easier for him. When I say help, I mean this is a good opportunity to work on reading zone coverage. I think in general it's probably easier for guys in the passing game when you know you've got a man on a man, a hat on a hat, and you just got to get to the open guy, as opposed to you've got to know which look they're in, you got to know which style of zone you're getting. You've got to be able to predict which defenders are responsible for which areas and predict which of your guys based on the route tree are going to come open. That's mentally challenging. So I think the layman, you can think about that and say, that makes my head spin a little bit. So that's good opportunity for him to exploit that. And it's a good opportunity for some of these receivers who, again, DeAndre is not the only guy that doesn't separate super well on this team. It's all of them. So it's an opportunity for some of these guys to get going in that regard. I'm curious to see, all of that being said, whether or not the Texans, they're not dumb, they realize this. Do they switch things up and go to a more man-heavy game plan against this Tennessee team? Or do they stick to their guns? I'm not sure if they have the talent required on the defensive side of the ball to do that. What are your thoughts on that look, the offense on defense?
Yeah, I think the best way to put it, they do have some good guys on that secondary. Jalen Petrie has always been good for them. Derek Stingley in this year has shown flashes. But to be honest, why that zone works is because the sum is greater than the parts, I think, for this Texans secondary unit. And that's why they're able to work so well in zone. So if they do go away from that, I still think that the advantage still goes to DeAndre Hopkins, because I think he is more of a seasoned veteran and is more established and has the ability to still create separation if they do move over to that man coverage. But this secondary unit is better when they work together. So I think it's hard for me to see them moving away from so much zone that they've already used against plenty of teams that have more weapons than just DeAndre Hopkins. I think you probably will see once again, unfortunately, this Tim Kelly offense use Treylon Burks again as kind of a distraction, as to make space for others. While I would love to see him actually get involved in this passing game, right. It can't be understated that he has provided opportunities for his fellow teammates when he's been doing that. So I expect to see that some more. And then sneakily, I think NWI could have another good day, sure. Funny enough, against this Texans team. So it'll be interesting to see.
Got a lot of different thoughts here and a lot of different directions we can take this. So I'm sorry if it's kind of herky-jerky. Let's talk about Davis Mills real quick. This is another big one that I find interesting. A lot of folks are writing off this Texans team or chalking it up to a win because of the fact that you're getting Davis Mills, not CJ Stroud. And certainly that's a big deal. There's a reason why. We'll get to it later in the Best Bet Gauntlet. We've told you to take the Titans under the 3 if you're betting them, because they were sitting there at 1.5, 2.5. They've moved to 3 after today. You saw CJ Stroud is not practicing again, which means he's unlikely to play this weekend. Very unlikely. And because of all of that, for good reason, in general, they're thinking this is going to be a much easier task for the Titans defense and for the Titans team as a whole. That's fair. What isn't fair is to write off Davis Mills as an Easton stick situation. Not to denigrate my namesake. I'm very sorry, Mr. Stick, fellow Easton, but it's different. Davis Mills has played this team 3 times before. If you go back and look, I think folks have kind of forgotten what not just a Davis Mills-led Texans team against the Titans looks like, but specifically a worse Texans team. Like, C.J. Stroud was not the only upgrade this Texans team has sustained this season. They've got much better coaching, and they've got better personnel. This is the best Davis Mills-led team this Titans team is going to be seeing. Last year, the most recent time they played, Davis Mills played the Titans at home, at Nissan Stadium here in Nashville. A home game for the Titans where the Titans lost 19-14, one of those games at the end of the year where they were on a 7-game losing streak. Davis Mills, 17 of 28, 60% completion, 178 yards, a touchdown, and interception. Before that, let's see, last year they lost to the Titans in week 7. He went 17 for 29, 152 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Again, not daunting. But that was a 17-10 loss. That was to the Malik Willis Titans, where they just ran the ball down the Texans. I don't think the Titans are quite that same running team anymore. Actually, I'll go ahead and sit on my chest. They're not that same running team anymore. And then if you go back even further, the third game that Davis Mills played against the Titans, which I'm pulling up here,
which is his best, arguably,
100% his best personal performance. He played them at the end of 2021 season in January of 22. It was that game where the Texans gave the Titans a scare for the 1 seed. The Titans were going to get the 1 seed wrapped up if they just won that Week 18 game. It was a 28-25 win for the Titans, but Mills went 23 of 33, nearly 70% passer rating, or completion percentage, 301 yards and 3 touchdowns, no turnovers. That's what he's capable of against this Titans team. He's gone 1-2, but he's had a good game in there. And he's got a win in there. And again, can I stress this enough? He's on a much better team now than he was then. That being said, folks in the comments, chime in on this if you have thoughts. But JT, what are your thoughts on? I feel strongly that people are underrating what this Texans team can do against this Titans team with Davis Mills. And let's bake in the fact they're arguably the more desperate team in this matchup. They have playoff aspirations. They're in that muck of 19, I think is it 19 or 20 AFC teams, something like that. They're all right there within one of each other. They all could get into the wild card. They need to do that badly. They're going to do everything they can to win this game, even with the backup quarterback.
Yeah, I think it's not easy to count him out, I think, given his track record. I think also to the point of why people are kind of counting him out, it's because, and this will be something that we talk about a little bit later in the news, just how many injuries this team is plagued with. That offense that looked very, very good with C.J. Stroud is not going to have 3 of their top best playmakers this upcoming week. Spoiler alert, there's a very high chance that the Robert Woods is the number 1 wide receiver this week for
which will be poetic
Texans
when he goes off for 128 yards and 11 receptions.
In that sense, yes. If the Houston Texans can pull out a win where Davis Mills and Robert Woods look like just absolute beasts in this game,
right?
Good for them, man. But good
for them, bad for the Titans.
Yes.
The Titans need to make them look like the pumpkins that they are.
Yes,
that's the long and short of it. And the guy that can help do that is Derrick Henry. So let's talk about him and what his impact in this game can be. You tweeted out earlier today a reminder for everybody what Derrick Henry has done just on the ground, just his rushing yards in his last 5 games against the Texans. One of the single most impressive statistics in all of football right now. His last 5 games, 211, 212, 250, 219, and then a measly 126 rushing.
And then I asked the question, what do you think Vegas would set the over-under on his rushing yards this week?
Do you know what it is?
I do know.
I do not.
They just said it earlier.
Let me guess. Today. So this is along the lines of our conversation because it's going to be less with Tajay a part of the game plan, with Derrick and in particular this offensive line not being super conducive to his style of success. Not It's hard to talk about it because when you say Derrick Henry isn't playing as well, he's still getting like 50, 60, 70 yards at least in most of these games. So it's by his very lofty standards. I'll guess the over-under rushing yards is 67.
Man, you should be setting lines. It's 66.5.
Is it really?
Yes.
No, okay, so I swear I didn't look it up. That's really impressive. So I guess I'm taking the over, technically. But that, yeah, wow. Good night, everybody. It's been for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. So okay, that makes sense. Do you happen to know what Tajay's number is?
I do not, but I can look it up.
You
here.
look that up.
It's 24.5.
Okay, so they're expecting about 100 rushing yards out of this Titans team, give or take, 90 to 100 rushing yards, and for most to come from Derrick Henry. Again, this is not the same offensive line that the Titans have had in the past in the run game, and it's certainly not the same defensive line, run defense, that this Texans team has had in the past. They're not the walkover those 4 games in a row where Derrick Henry for 2 straight years rushed for north of 200 yards against that team, week in and week out. That defensive line is gone. That's not a thing anymore. Now, injuries are a factor for this defensive line for the Texans, so maybe that changes things. What are you expecting from Henry and Spears this weekend? Do you think it looks like what we saw on Monday night, where you've got a heavy Spears game plan? And, of course, we know this is all dictated by game script, right? You're going to get more Spears if they're down. You're going to get more Henry if they're up, I think. What do you anticipate happening with those two?
Well, like we said earlier, I think the 3 stats we kind of laid out at the beginning of the show are kind of 3 important keys to the game. They love this season to really try to get Henry rushing up the middle. Don't allow him to get to the outside very often. And this is a Texans team that is the second best at defending the run when you are trying to rush it up the middle. So obviously, I think with some of the injuries that this Texans front 7 is going to have, as well with this offensive line for the Titans just playing objectively better at home, it's going to be important that Derrick Henry at least makes an impact in some way. But I do also expect Tyjae Spears to continue to, like we said on our show earlier this week, continue to get his carries as Tim Kelly finds the sweet spot of using both Tyjae Spears and Derrick Henry.
I agree. Stoney in the comments asking if Easton is chugging a pint of straight vodka. No. But wouldn't that be impressive?
It would be impressive.
If I could do that with a straight face.
Yeah.
You know me well enough to know that's not possible.
No.
Stoney, you should know a thing or two about me. That ain't my game, boss. You wouldn't want to hear me talk or make noises if I was doing that.
And Kenneth says in the chat here, Henry has officially reached short yardage / goal line back status. He says, please stop slamming him into the line and giving Levis in 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 7.
So let's talk about that, because I do find that fascinating. And we talked a little bit about it on Monday, where he is kind of in that Zeke Elliott to Tyjae's Tony Pollard role that we saw with the Cowboys the last 2 seasons. I think that this game will be a good litmus test for whether we're fully there yet or not. I do agree that in the first quarter, in the first half, but specifically at the beginning of the game, when they just pound Henry and try to establish the run up the middle, like, I'm with you. I think that's fruitless. It's silly. I do think that he can still be. I don't think he is like Zeke, who truly had just didn't have the juice anymore at the end of his Cowboys run. It's not like that with Henry. I think that, yes, he's going to continue to be best used on the goal line, sure, and short yardage, sure. But I think if you utilize him wisely in a game, assuming it's going to plan and you're not getting blown out or killing a team, when you get to that second half, in particularly that fourth quarter, if you've used Henry enough here and there in those goal line spots, in those short yardage spots, in certain looks, maybe two running back looks, and you've worn down a defense like the Titans, built their success on in the recent past, throwing him against the line for 3 quarters and then just having him eat in the fourth quarter when the defense is just tired of a dump truck running them over every play. I think he can still be utilized effectively in that way. It just requires being patient with his usage and rolling out the red carpet for him in that fourth quarter. Again, if you can afford to, in terms of the score on the scoreboard.
Yeah, I agree with you totally there. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Tyjae Spears is used once again at home, because we have moved away from the stat that 20 carries guarantees you a Derrick Henry win, which is I'm very glad that we've done that.
God bless.
But I think that you're right. You in the first couple of drives into this game, you're still going to see Derrick Henry trying to establish that run, and he may very well be able to do so this week with how banged up the Texans are.
Willie G in the comments saying, I thought we moved Henry to wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, based on what we saw on Monday night, yeah, apparently he's a wideout now. We'll see if that continues. All right, that's about all I have in terms of breaking down the matchup. There's some more things we could dive into, but nothing that I think really warrants our precious listeners' time. Let's talk about some news. We've got some more statistics and some news items, including the injury report. So without further ado, here's producer JT with the news.
Yeah, let's talk about the injury report here, and we're going to start with the Titans side. A couple of guys who were limited in practice today. Anthony Kendall with a knee. Kayvon Wallace was actually full. Derrick Henry limited, as well as Aaron Brewer and Danico Autry both popped up as limited, so that was good for them to be out there today. A couple of guys who did not practice today: Jack Gibbons, who is now listed 2 DMPs, along with a back injury. Right, okay. Another one, Kyle Phillips, also not practicing yet this week with a hamstring. Ooh. Interesting one there. Kevin Rader with an illness. Tier Tart just with rest and a personal. And then Jeffrey Simmons, Josh Wiley, and Daniel Brunskill, all DMPs or very limited in their participation in practice so far. Easton, give me your 1,000-foot view on the injury situation right now with this team and who you are hopeful still finds their way onto the field.
So a number of these are expected, right? We know that Simmons and Wiley are out. With Tart, I find it curious because this is the second week now where he's missed some practices. This week, it's been every practice, non-injury related, personal reasons. Not sure, that could be something, could be nothing. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate, but I do find it curious. The most concerning guy on here, shockingly, is Jack Gibbons to me. That's not because Jack Gibbons is an incredible weapon for this defense. That's not what I'm saying. But it does mean that if you don't have him out there alongside Azeez Al-Shaair, you're either getting a lot more of I'm blanking on his name. They just re-signed him. The UDFA.
TK McClendon?
No. He was a big, look this up for me because I'm totally blanking on his name. He was like this year's Dr. Gibby for Vrabel, who really liked him in the preseason, and I just cannot remember who.
Caleb Murphy?
No.
Or
Otis Reese.
Otis Reese.
Yes. That's who I'm thinking of. That was great radio. Yeah. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with me there, folks. Otis Reese. It means you might get a lot more of rookie UDFA Otis Reese, and you might get a lot more. Who else is on the depth chart? Who am I forgetting?
Caleb Murphy as well, but then also Travis Gibson.
Luke Gifford.
Luke Gifford as well.
Luke Gifford. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot more of either Gifford or Reese, neither of which are a guy that you really want to see a ton of defensive snaps from, but you're going to have to if you don't have Dr. Gibby out there. So that's a big one to pay attention to. Who else? Oh, Kayvon Wallace. I think it's sneaky important for them to have him. He's looked good on the field, like surprisingly good to me. My expectations for him were low, but he's been a contributor when he's played the past 2 weeks, and I think that they could really use him on the back end in general. So those are the two that most stick out to me. Kyle Phillips, man, I don't know. What is there to say? Just the injury thing. If he turns out to be a player that is really good in theory, and I continue to say he's good when he's healthy, and he just is never healthy, and he just can never stay healthy. That sucks, and there's nothing I can do about it. But it appears he's continuing to deal with issues. Maybe he'll play and prove me wrong, but at this point I'm just sad.
Yes.
Let's talk about the Texans injuries.
Yeah, and then we can move on to the Texans, and this is the biggest one right here. I'm going to list for you the players that have gone 2 straight days now without practicing.
That's a lot of them.
Will Anderson, Blake Cashman, Nico Collins, George Fant, CJ Stroud, Travier Thomas, and Laramie Tunsil actually was upgraded to a full participation, but the guys before him have not practiced. So the big one there on the defensive side of the ball, Will Anderson,
right?
Having him not out there would be
an ankle
huge.
Injury. High ankle sprain.
It would be huge for the Titans this week in that offensive line. And then on the other side of the ball, Nico Collins with that calf that came out of that game, and a lot of sources were fearing the worst for his injury. Has not practiced yet, and then CJ Stroud continues to be in concussion protocol. So yeah, you could be looking at a defense for the Texans without Will Anderson, and then a Texans offense where, like we said, Noah Brown and Robert Woods.
Receiver? Yeah, okay.
Robert
Like, what
Woods
position? I'll
is
help you out
the
here.
is the
There
top
you
is
go.
the top two options
Right.
for.
And Noah Brown, by the way,
Texans.
who's been limited this week with an injury of his own, a knee injury, so he won't even be 100%.
Yes.
Assuming he plays. The guys that stick out most there that you mentioned, George Fant and Tunsil both being on the list, both bookend tackles for this team. They need at least one.
Yep.
I know which one I prefer. One of them is a top 2 tackle in the league, and one is a rental veteran. It looks like they're going to get the better one based on today's practice report where he was full. So that's good news for the Texans. But no George Fant on their side. I'm not sure what the backup situation looks like. I'd imagine it's not free, considering they've already had a decent amount of offensive line triage as it is this year, and they're not super deep at that position. Nobody really is. That could be a very good thing for the continued success of the Titans pass rush, which has, dare I say, put a couple of games together at this point.
Yeah, and we can move on now to a couple of moves that the Titans made earlier this week. First of all, Kyle Pecco and Christian Fulton both were placed on injured reserve. Talking about Christian Fulton a little bit, this almost signals that basically he has played his last snaps probably as a Tennessee Titan. And then the Titans also signed a couple of guys to from practice squads to their active roster. First of all, defensive lineman Quentin Bohanna from Detroit's practice squad. And then defensive lineman Keandre Coburn from the Kansas City's practice squad is actually a guy that we talked about a little bit during the draft process, but he was on Kansas City's practice squad. What do you make of at least the moves here, placing Christian Fulton and Kyle Pecco on the injured reserve?
So Pecco was you could see that one coming based off of his injury, unfortunately getting carted off Monday night. Fulton, I'm not super surprised by, though apparently he was surprised by that when he was told by the media this week, hey, you're on IR, and he said, I am. Yep, you sure are. So he won't be playing again for the Titans this season. And like you said, I'd imagine not again ever. So long farewell, Christian Fulton, I'm assuming. But the guys that they added, it's interesting. Obviously, you're trying to continue to. You've lost Kyle Pecco was a nice familiar depth piece for you for a guy like Jeffrey Simmons who's out right now. You're going to need somebody else rotation wise to fill that gap. And Coburn we found fascinating in the draft. So I think that was clearly a guy that was on their draft board. They said, let's go get that guy. See, let's just see what's going on. See if he can contribute for us. Don't know anything about Bohanna, to be honest with you. So we'll see if either of those guys are active on Sunday afternoon, and if so, what they look like out there.
Yeah, and let's talk about how much turnover that this Titans team could possibly be in for next season. Currently, the most 2023 snaps that have been played who are by players who are set to hit free agency, Tennessee leads the league in that stat with 44%. So 44% of this roster who is currently taking snaps are going to be free agents.
That's almost half, kids.
Could be it could be a bad thing for depth, but also could be a good thing with how bad the
when
talent.
You look at the list of who those guys are, it becomes a lot less upsetting to Titans. If you're a Titans fan, that number should concern you. But then you look at who it is in question here, it becomes a lot less concerning. It's the guys that you want pushed out. Their contracts are expiring. I mean, you've got some Derrick Henrys in there and, some NWIs in there you wouldn't mind keeping around. But in general, it's the guys who are designed to be pushed out by the new regime. And so that's it's not a mistake that they're all coming up for new contracts with somebody this offseason. It's because the Titans are ready to say, thank you for your service. Goodbye. And so it's good news ultimately for the Titans. And if you're a fan of Rand Carthon, and I don't know how you can't be based on what he's done so far, especially in the draft, it's good news because that's a lot of cash coming like that. We keep talking about it. The Titans have $80 million, $100 million in cap cash. That's where it's coming from. All these guys coming off the books. And so he's going to get to put those dollars towards guys that are his guys. He's going to get to put draft picks of his into the position to play in the role that those guys were playing. And so that's very good news for a team that is turning the page, that is going to be young and new and fresh and trying to build around a young rookie quarterback. That's good. And I think fans should celebrate the fact that we are officially coming to the end of the John Robinson era. as well as the end of the first era of this Titans team identity, player personnel wise, in the Mike Vrabel coaching era.
Yeah, and then finally, let's talk about a rooting guide for the Titans this week.
And it's complicated. Boys and girls, if you're interested in this, get out your pens and paper right now.
So you can figure out who to put in your pick'em pools and whatnot this week. But let's talk about draft.
If you're doing
position.
pick'em based on who you need to win, I don't know if you're going to win your league.
Exactly. But at least if you're rooting for the Titans to have a better draft position this week, you want all the underdogs to win this week, essentially. So Las Vegas tonight. The Jets, Giants, Chicago, and the Commanders to all take care of business would help the Titans in their draft position battle this season. And then, God forbid, if you are still holding out hope for the Tennessee Titans to make the playoffs.
They're not dead, JT.
Who I believe are at a 1% chance right now.
It's either 1 or less than 1.
They would need Minnesota to beat Cincinnati. Pittsburgh to beat the Indianapolis Colts. Detroit to beat Denver. Dallas to beat Buffalo, Chicago to beat Cleveland, and Baltimore to beat Jacksonville.
And it's funny, I saw this is all based off of a tweet from our buddy Justin Graver. You can go if you want this, right? And go to Justin Graver's social media accounts, I guess. But I saw this from him. I trust this is real. But then I was like, I wonder what all of those things, like if everything went perfectly for the Titans, playoff position based on this chart, how does it improve their numbers? So I went to the New York Times playoff machine. And currently, as constituted, the Titans are a less than 1% chance to get in. If they win this weekend, they become a full 1% chance. You get that less than taken away. And then if all of those things happen, some of the simulations I ran, it bumped them to 2%.
Ooh,
2%. That's double. Listen, that's doubling your chances.
Yes.
That is doubling. And in some, it just didn't change it. So I also went through just for reference. And if the Titans, regardless of any other outcome, just the Titans go 4-0 down the stretch. They beat the Texans twice, the Jaguars at home, and the Seahawks at home. Do they have a significantly better chance of getting the playoffs? Yes, it's significantly better, but is it good? No, it's 15% if they win out. So they need to win out, and a
lot of
bunch of things to go their way, a bunch of teams in front of them to really fall apart. So again, don't hold your breath. Please don't do that to yourself. But they are technically not dead. Yes.
And that's going to do it for our news section.
All right,
today.
that's producer JT with that news, and that leaves us with just one segment to get to, the Best Bet Gauntlet, my favorite segment of the week. It's where JT and I go through and pick draft style, our 5 favorite sides for this week's NFL slate. We are approaching week 15, and JT and I both went 3-2 last week. A tie means I still have the T box here because he beat me 2 weeks ago. And so I'm going to kick us off with my first pick of the Week 15 Best Bet Gauntlet. Oh, by the way, I'm very sorry. Our updated records on the year. JT maintains a 2-game lead on me. 2.5, I think. Yeah, 2.5-game lead, actually. I am 44-34-2 on the year. Very successful. JT, a blazing 46-30-3 on the year. So both of us doing very well, making you a lot of money. Looking to continue that trend this week. I believe we've had 3 consecutive weeks where we have not just made money, but made us probably. I think this is our best 3-week span of the year that we're coming off of. So let's make it 4. And with that, my first pick of the Week 15 Best Bet Gauntlet, I'm taking once again for the 14th consecutive week because the bye was in there. Taking the Tennessee Titans -2 versus Houston. This is why it pays to follow the Best Bet Gauntlet, just not just on the show, but on social media, where we tell you during the week on Tuesday and Wednesday when the lines are set. We occasionally tag hashtag Best Bet Gauntlet and at Hot Read Pod on social media if you ever want to just search for them to make sure you don't miss them. Lines that we expect to move, the reasons why, and we lock in those numbers ahead of time, telling you, the people, hey, grab these 2. I put out 3 this week, and 2 of them were in fact moving, did in fact end up moving the wrong way. If you wanted that side, you didn't get closing line value, so I hope you took it with me. One of those was Tennessee -2 against Houston this weekend. This is now at 3. Once we're sure it's Davis Mills, and once we're sure about a lot of these injury situations on both sides of this matchup, we know who's in and out. It's not inconceivable that could become even more, become a 3.5, 4. I don't think it will be, but I doubt it ever comes back down off the 3. I still don't mind it at the 3, but at the 2, I love this spot. Very simple. Tennessee at home. They are the better team if Davis Mills is playing for this Houston team. Houston is very banged up. They aren't the more desperate team. Houston's going to be giving them their all because they need this win to keep their playoff hopes vibrant. But I think the Tennessee has a lot of momentum coming off of that Monday night win. they're going to have a lot. I think psychologically that win did more for them than anything. The fact that they now realize we could go on the road and beat the Miami Dolphins, one of the most explosive teams, one of the worst mismatched teams for us in particular in the league. If we can do that, we can beat anybody. We can certainly beat the Texans, who a lot of players on this team have beaten up on in the past. Let's keep it going. And the energy that young guys like Will Levis and Tyjae Spears, clearly and obviously, based on a lot of video that was released this week, both of those guys bring a ton of psychotic, competitive, fiery energy to the sidelines. It's infectious. You had guys like Harold Landry this week saying, I saw Will Levis screaming, going veiny Hulk mode on the sideline. I didn't know he had that in them. It had that in him, and I love it. That kind of thing's infectious. I think this team's going to ride high on his leadership. I think they get it done, and they win by a field goal. Give me Tennessee -2 hosting Houston.
Yeah, with my first pick here, I locked this one in actually earlier when the line finally moved. It's no brainer for me, though. I'm taking the New York Giants and Tommy DeVito.
Not his cousin,
yeah,
Danny.
not his cousin, Danny.
Tommy Cutlets.
Yeah, Tommy Cutlets in the New York Giants +6 going to the New Orleans Saints. Listen, I just plain out think the Giants are currently the better team right now. And if you want a couple of trends
well,
that
and
also
more importantly, who is New Orleans to be giving 6 points to anybody?
Exactly.
They're a bad team.
They are a bad team. And if you want a couple of trends here, the Saints against the spread recently in their last 15 is 4-10-1 dating back to 2022. The Saints are also 1-5 against the spread at home this season. And they also have the second worst home against the spread record since 2021, going 6-15 against the spread. I'm buying the hot team. I'm not looking to sell them just yet because I just frankly think that is too many points for this Saints team to cover with. So I'm taking the Giants +6.
I love that. Before we get to my next bet, I just noticed in the comments here, Kenneth pointing out our discussion on the Titans playoff odds there a moment ago. It's like that scene in Monty Python's Holy Grail. I'm not dead yet. Yes, you are. I'm feeling better. No, you're not. That's the Titans playoff odds. With my second pick of the Week 15 best bet gauntlet. I like that pick, by the way. Not to totally disagree. I'm with you on the Giants in that one. I'm with you. It's Cowboys 8 o'clock for my second pick. I'm going with the Buffalo Bills, another line that I locked in earlier this week. It didn't move the way I thought it would, and that's not shocking in hindsight. Dallas is always going to get overbet by zealous Cowboys fans, of which there are too many. And so that number's kind of stayed right there, but I don't mind. It's great. So if you didn't get it earlier, you can get the same number now. It's Buffalo -2 at home hosting the Cowboys. I have all year long not just preached, but also made money off of the idea that this Cowboys team beats bad teams. And a funny, mostly joke, but also kind of wink, wink, like maybe thing that was going around this week was maybe the Cowboys still haven't beaten a good team. They beat up on the Eagles last week. They barely beat the Seahawks a couple weeks ago. Those are the two most recent games. And they, I believe, still don't have a winning record against teams that have a winning record that they've played this year. And so I just am going with the more desperate team that I also think in this case happens to be the better team. I think Buffalo they're both good teams. Don't get me wrong. They're both contending teams. I think Buffalo is better than they are. I think that defense is continuing to settle down after they've got their backups in there for a couple weeks. They're starting to find their roles and settle in. I think that Josh Allen is the better quarterback, although you've got a match with two, in my opinion, two front runners for the MVP this year. And so I think that it's going to be a tight one that Buffalo ends up winning. I'm just giving them the home field advantage. You're playing outdoors in December in Buffalo, New York. Dallas is not quite used to that. I think that Buffalo gets the edge here. They're more desperate. They need this win because they need everyone at this point. Buffalo -2 hosting the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, with my next pick, I'm taking the Motor City Kitties. And you might be saying why? Because this is the bottom of the market, I think, once again, for them. I'm taking them -4.5 against the red-hot Denver Broncos.
Top market.
Just like last week, and I should have stayed with my Seahawks pick. I was a little too scared of Drew Lock, but they still found a way to cover.
Oh, I didn't even notice that they covered. You're totally
right.
Yes,
but Detroit -4.5 here. I hope it gets back down to the 4. I'll be looking out for that. I wish I could get it at the flat 4, but alas. Either way, going up against Denver, this is once again another spot where I'm selling high on the Denver Broncos and buying low on the Detroit Lions. Goff, after a straight-up loss with the Lions, is 15-8 against the spread, including 11-4 against the spread when that game is played at home. They're on the road this week, but I still really, really like what he's doing this year. Jared Goff has had a couple of bad games, but this team is still very much in contention for an outside shot at the 1 seed. They still need
Where
to
have those bad games been played, by the way?
outside.
Jared Goff, the outdoor pumpkin, returns to the indoor.
Yes.
It seems silly, but we've got a large sample size that says it's a very big deal for this guy. Don't ask me why.
And so with this, all this being said, this team has to get back on track if they want to even continue to win the division. So I'm going to take the Detroit
This is the spot for the buy low, sell high situation with these two teams. So I'll be making that bet alongside you with my third pick of the week 15 best bet gauntlet. Give me Minnesota plus 3.5 at the Cincinnati Bengals. This is another one that I told you to lock in early because I'm not sure you can still get the 3.5 right now. I think it's at a flat 3. Maybe you wait, see if you can get it at 3.5 before the game starts on Sunday. But I think that Minnesota is the play here when you're getting that hook. Absolutely. Minnesota plus 3.5 is the play because of this. This is a matchup between Nick Mullins and Jake Browning. Trying to catch. This is the opposite of the catching the falling knife. I don't know. Popping the rising balloon. Something like that. We'll workshop that. It's going to come eventually a day that Jake Browning falls back to. Like it has to. It has to. Unless he's just a starter in the league now, which if you want to believe that, you'd be my guest. I'm not in yet. Give me some more of Jake Browning before we make that decision. I think that this is the spot. You've got confirmation like in a grocery store last night from Justin Jefferson. Like he was shopping with kids for a holiday thing, which is great, but it was just funny. He told the media that was there, he's like, oh yeah, actually I think one of the kids asked, are you playing on something? He's like, yep, playing. Okay, well there's some news. Justin Jefferson's playing. That's a big deal for a guy like Nick Mullins, who's going to be trying to pass the ball out there. Assuming he plays, I see these offenses as equals, really, and I think it comes down to who has the better defense. And that brings up my main point. The Vikings have the better defense here. Love what Big Lou Anarumo does. Like, big fan of Big Lou. Do not get me wrong. But Brian Flores, what he's done with this Vikings defense this year has gone really underplayed outside of Minnesota. He's been a maniac, and I think the performance that he's put up with a pretty mediocre cast of characters for the Vikings defense, he's done a really, really nice job. They're playing above their weight. And he's sneaky done one of the best coaching jobs of the year is what I wrote down here. His style is absolute wild man pressures, and that works against bad quarterbacks. Like Jake Browning's going to be on the move all night long. It's going to require him to do some things that he's not done in the past couple of starts that he's had, and I don't think it's going to go super well for him. So for that reason, give me Minnesota plus 3.5 at your Cincinnati Bengals.
And I hate to say it, but I don't think you're wrong about that one.
Yeah.
But with my next pick here, I'm going with the Los Angeles Rams finally back at home, playing the Washington Commanders coming off their bye. And this one's pretty simple. I think Ron Rivera is on his way out of Washington. Yep. I think this team is pretty much given up on this year, even though Sam Howell has been looking pretty promising this year with a pretty bad cast of characters. This is a Los Angeles team that is not dead in the slightest. And now are coming back home to face what I think is probably one of the worst secondaries in the league in this Washington Commanders secondary.
Yes.
With that being said, I really do like LA. What they've done all season. Once again, they played a very, very good game in the rain against the Baltimore Ravens. Now this time they get to be at home playing a team that is much worse than the Ravens. I'm expecting them to take care of business and win by a touchdown or more.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one with my fourth pick of the week 15 best bet gauntlet. I'm going with Chicago plus 3 at Cleveland. Now I'm going to wait to bet this one until I know I can't get a 3.5. I think it's possible that it's coming on this Cleveland team, some square bettors bump it back up for me because I love the hook, but I'm still comfortable taking it at the 3 either way. A couple of reasons why. This Bears team has gone really under the radar because they're not that good and they've been a pain to watch for a long time. They've been playing pretty good ball the past couple of, really the past month.
Yep.
And they've been playing with house money because they've got the number 1 seed locked down no matter whether they win, lose, or draw. Shout out the Carolina Panthers for that. So they're chilling draft-wise. There's no incentive to tank. And they've been playing well. Justin Fields playing for his job, really. The coaching staff definitely playing for their coaching their jobs. And I'm sure there are many players on that team that feel like they are having to play for their jobs because of the turnover this team is going to experience in the next couple of years. Joe Flacco on the other side of the ball, they just signed him, the Browns did, to a 1-year deal. He's going to be their guy for the rest of the year. He's a fun story, don't get me wrong. I love seeing geriatric Joe Flacco just loving ball, playing ball. Still got an arm. Definitely still has an arm. But he's going to be behind an offensive line this weekend that just lost their third offensive tackle this year. So they're down to tackle 4 and 5. I don't care what team you're on and what depth they have. That's a recipe for disaster.
Yep.
And he is the worst possible quarterback you want to put behind that situation because he is the biggest statue in the league right now. He's 38. He's Joe Flacco. He couldn't move when he was healthy. He can't move now. And so their center got hurt last week too, by the way. You've got a really banged up team across the board for Cleveland. Jerome Ford, running back, he's banged up. Safety Grant Delpit moved to IR this week. You got a couple of starting defensive linemen and a depth defensive lineman, both hurt and questionable this weekend. The Bears, for their part, essentially completely healthy and mobile quarterbacks. One last note on Justin Fields. We know this Browns defense has been vicious, and it's going to be easily the toughest challenge that this Bears offense has faced in their kind of resurgence here at the end of the year. The one thing that has given the Browns defense issues this year consistently has been mobile quarterback play. That is what Justin Fields is. I expect them. I think they're going to win this game outright. I really do. I think it's going to be one of the bigger upsets of the week and catch some folks off guard. But I certainly like the cover situation here. Give me Chicago +3 at Cleveland.
I think it's interesting that you're going against the elite quarterback in this matchup, but I'll give that one to you because I also like it.
Team sport, man.
Yes, with my next pick, I am going with Indianapolis -1.5 at home against Pittsburgh. And you might be thinking back to last week, and you said, "Wait, JT, you just said that this team was frauds not too long ago." Yes,
this is the fraud bowl.
I think this is the fraud bowl. This is the fraud off. And if I just have to pick a team straight up, I'm going with Gardner Minshew over Mitchell Trubisky, who looked god awful. They go on the road once again to Indianapolis, which I think
want to ride the Mitch train.
I just can't. You said this was gross, and you were saying I might bet against you, and I was like,
and then I thought about it for a second. Then I thought about it and realized I'm not hopping on the Mitch train.
This is definitely the square side of it this week, but I'm going to take it because I've done it all season. There have been a couple square sides that I just frankly have liked.
This is certified JT sharps are dumb play.
Yes, this is the sharps are dumb play of the week. I can't do it, man. I can't bet with Mitchell Trubisky. Another interesting note: when Minshew's opponent scores more than 20 points, he is 2-17 straight up after losing to the Bengals last week. This is a Steelers team that averages 16.2 points a game. I think this
check that box. That checks the box.
This favors me in this matchup, and this Indianapolis Colts team is truly playing for something. For my monies right now. For the head coach of the year candidate in Shane Steichen. So give me the Colts just to win this one outright.
I dig it. I think I'm with you on that after I gave it some thought. I'll probably just not be betting it personally.
That's fair.
But for the sake of the gauntlet, I'll sprinkle a little on Indy and be rooting for you. With my fifth and final pick of the week 15 best bet gauntlet, give me the grossest. Folks, don't lose consciousness. Don't cut yourself with a knife if you're chopping up food right now for dinner. Careful when I say this, okay? Is everybody ready? Go with New England, +7.5 at home against Kansas City. The reason I'm picking this is because this time of year, professional bettors clean up on making the picks that nobody wants to touch. And there is not a side on this slate, for my money, that is less attractive to a surface level evaluation of the matchup than New England versus Kansas City. Think about what we've heard this week. Kansas City, the way that they lost to the Bills last weekend, crying Mahomes, angry Mahomes, that team having to deal with that drama this week. They have every motivation in the world to come out and just waylay a bad team, just take out their frustrations on them. For the Patriots' part, these reports from Tom Curran that it's been decided for months now that Belichick's out after this year. So what is he actually playing for? What's he actually coaching for? This team's still going through real quarterback issues with Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones. It's gross. There feels like there's no reason to bet this game. That's why I'm going to bet this game, because that's what you have to do this time of year to make the money. I know that there's a couple of It's been a while since I mentioned the syndicates. There's 2 syndicates that I know of, big money syndicates this week that have very significant exposure on this New England side. I'm going to add myself to that list. We know historically, Kansas City, Mahomes, very good at covering when he's under that 3-point number as a favorite. When he's over a 3-point favorite, he's very bad. When he's over a touchdown favorite, even worse. And that's the case here. I also am going to wait to bet this one because it wouldn't shock me at all if the public sees this as the most obvious pick of the week. They bump that number up and up and up to 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5. Make my day, make it a 10. I dare you to make it a 10. They're not going to, but I'm begging the people to come in heavy on this one. So give me New England plus 7.5 versus Kansas City, and we're going to hope and pray.
Yeah. And with my last pick, this is one I've gone back and forth on because it was the only other one that I really, really thought had inside, and I've gone back and forth on it all day. But I'm taking, but I'm taking Baltimore minus 3.5, hoping it gets back down to the flat 3. But I still feel okay with the 3.5.
It's trending in that direction.
So with that, I really do think that this Baltimore team is the better team in this matchup. Going on to prime time, I think Lamar Jackson, they had a scare last week, but I think they're going to continue to seize the opportunity that the Miami Dolphins gave them last week and plant themselves as the number 1 seed in the AFC. They're going up against a Jacksonville team that still is banged up, but I think has been a little fraudulent all season. And kind of we've been a little bit right that this team has some nice offensive weapons, but outside of that, what else do they really have?
Right.
And that continues to be the trend here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Despite them being at home here, I like Lamar to take care of business in this one. I think this Baltimore team is just the better team front to back, and I'm going to take them either at 3 or minus 3.5.
All right, so to recap, JT is rocking with the Giants plus 6 at New Orleans, Detroit minus 4.5 at home against Denver, the Rams minus 6.5 at home against Washington, Indy minus 1.5 at home against Pittsburgh, and Baltimore minus 3.5 at Jacksonville. My picks this week, I'm going with Tennessee minus 2 at home against Houston, Buffalo minus 2 at home against Dallas, Minnesota plus 3.5 at Cincinnati, Chicago plus 3 at Cleveland, and New England plus 7.5 at home against the Kansas City Chiefs. That is our best bet gauntlet for the week 15, and that is our show for this Thursday evening. Big thank you to everybody that tuned in with us live today. Subscribe to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. Follow us on social media at Hot Repod on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for all of your show updates and notifications and content. Until Sunday afternoon, after JT and I are there watching the Oilers and the Texans battle this weekend, we'll be live back to our regularly scheduled between the afternoon slate before Sunday Night Football live show recapping everything that happened in the Titans-Texans matchup. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you this weekend.